It was a quiet May morning. The presidential palace carried its usual rhythm until a red light blinked on the secure line. Only one name was coded to that signal: the Vatican. No media. No entourage, just a voice. President Traoré stepped inside the room alone, unaware that one call would shift something no speech ever had. "President Traoré," the voice said. Calm, gentle. Pope Leo XIV didn't offer protocol or praise. "Today, we don't speak as leaders. Today, we speak as men." Traoré remained silent. The weight of authority suddenly gave way to something far heavier, being seen not as a symbol, but as a soul. The Pope continued, "True strength never raises its voice." Traoré closed his eyes. One tear fell, no cameras caught it. If this story speaks to something quiet inside you, comment "still human," because sometimes the loudest moment comes in silence. The Pope quoted Augustine, "Peace begins by loving truth." Traoré whispered, "We've lost too many chasing peace through war." No advisors, no politics, just one call, one connection. This wasn't diplomacy. It was reckoning. And the battlefield? The heart. "You carry more than policy," the Pope said. "You carry people's wounds," Traoré answered. "But who carries mine?" That silence, tender and unbroken, felt like healing. No verdicts. No strategy. Just two men in separate worlds finding the same ache. When the call ended, Traoré didn't move. He sat alone, hands folded, the line now silent. But inside, something loud had begun. If faith or leadership has ever shaken you, quietly share this story. Sometimes power begins with pause. That night, a dusty chapel behind the palace was unlocked. Its candles lit for the first time in years. Guards watched in confusion. Inside, Traoré sat still, no robe, no crown, no armor. Only presence. Only peace. The Vatican never released a statement, but the people felt it. Next morning, state radio opened with a single phrase: "When leaders find stillness, nations find breath." No one claimed authorship. It didn't need one. 3 weeks later, a church, mosque, and school broke ground on the same street. No banners, no slogans. Only bricks and hands working together. Beneath a tree nearby, a boy wrote in chalk. One voice called. We listened. Traoré's speeches grew quieter. Less command, more reflection. He no longer shouted conviction. He offered calm. "Once I ruled to be heard," he said. "Now I rule to listen." People began listening not to orders, but to meaning. A widow from the Sahel wrote a letter. "My children pray again, because they believe their president does." The letter never reached the press, but Traoré framed it. It hung in his office not for display, but as a mirror. A reflection of what power should carry: belief. At the military academy, a cadet asked, "Do we still fight?" A general replied, "We still defend." But now their drills ended with a minute of silence, not for the fallen, for the living, for what they might still build. At a village well, a grandmother told a journalist, "We used to fear announcements. Now we wait for his voice." When asked what changed, she simply smiled. "Maybe nothing in the world changed," she said, "but something inside him did." One Sunday, Traoré walked through a market, no guards, no speeches. A child handed him a paper dove. Traoré asked, "What's this?" The boy said, "You stopped shouting, so I started drawing." He kept the dove in his breast pocket for weeks. The opposition tried to weaponize the silence. "Too soft," they whispered, "too spiritual." But the people didn't want noise. They'd had enough of that. They wanted steadiness. And for the first time, they felt it. When a reporter asked, "What did the Pope tell you that changed everything?" Traoré said only, "He didn't tell me anything. He reminded me what I already knew but forgot to feel." In the chapel, He knelt alone. He prayed, not as president, but as a man, for clarity, for peace, for forgiveness. He didn't ask for power. He asked to be worthy of it. And for those watching, that was the real shift. A youth group from Kaya sent him 200 handwritten notes. Each had a single word: stay, stay steady, stay human, stay ours. He kept them in a small wooden box. They meant more than votes. They were trust, uncounted but alive. That year, school books changed. Under leadership, one new line appeared. When the noise ends and they still follow, you're leading. Teachers didn't explain it. They let students feel it. Because true understanding isn't taught. It's witnessed. The Pope never called again. He didn't need to. The echo lived on not in cathedrals, but in kitchens, schools, farms. Everywhere a quiet voice rose over fear. Everywhere someone led, without shouting. A journalist asked bluntly, "Are you still revolutionary?" Traoré paused. "I was once angry," he said. "Now I'm awake." One builds walls. The other opens doors. No one quoted it, but everyone remembered it. A prisoner wrote to him, "You don't know me, but I forgave myself after watching you forgive others." The letter ended with, "Sometimes redemption is borrowed. You loaned me some." It was signed only, Cell 43. In a war-torn district, volunteers set up a reading circle. They used speeches Traoré never published. "He's our poet now," one teenager joked, but they meant it. The violence in their lives needed rhythm. He gave it to them. An international summit invited him to speak. He declined. Instead, he sent a voice message. "Lead where you are, not where they expect you to stand." It played before 200 heads of state and landed heavier than any live speech. The Vatican sent a single envelope. Inside, a handwritten note from Pope Leo XIV. It read, "When men like you listen, the heavens lean closer." Traoré never framed it. He kept it inside a prayer book where only his heart could reach. Parliament pushed for a national day of unity. He approved it, but added a second line, not for celebrating peace but for protecting the silence that created it. Some didn't understand, but they honored it anyway. A teacher held up a chalkboard. "What is power?" A girl raised her hand. "When you don't need to yell," she said, "and people still believe you." The room fell quiet, because no one could add to that. In Ouagadougou, murals began to change. Not fists, not fire, but open hands, eyes closed in reflection. Graffiti read. He gave us back the silence. We filled it with meaning. At an old refugee camp, a small chapel reopened. It bore no cross, no crescent, just a quote on the wall. One voice heard, many hearts healed. They called it the Room of Echo. People came, not to speak, but to listen. This story isn't about politics. It's about the moment power paused and became something deeper. If you've ever been changed by a quiet truth, leave a comment, share it. Let silence speak louder than slogans. In a coastal village, a fisherman told his son, "Leaders used to speak above us. He speaks among us." They didn't vote. They didn't protest, but they started cleaning their beach. Change didn't come from orders. It came from example. A retired soldier gave back his medals, not in anger, in peace. They meant war, he said, but he taught us how to win without it. He replaced them with a single photo Traoré, head bowed in prayer. University students debated one topic. Can silence lead a nation? Some mocked the question, but one girl stood and said, "We've tried noise. Maybe now it's time we try grace." The class applauded not the answer, but the courage. Foreign journalists grew curious. No bodyguards? No script? Traoré replied, "I'm not performing." They didn't understand. He wasn't trying to be seen. He was trying to see, and in doing so, others began seeing too. A nun and a rapper held a joint youth seminar. They quoted different holy books, but both ended with the same message. You don't need to shout to be heard. You need to listen to be remembered. Some critics called it a phase, a PR move. But they missed something. Traoré didn't publicize his changes. The people did. Because when the heart moves, it doesn't post. It pulses. In a quiet village, a boy reenacted Traoré's chapel visit. He wore no crown, no robe, just a chair and a look of stillness. Other kids watched, then copied. Soon, silence became play. And that's how culture changes, not by force, but by imitation. A woman once shouted at him in the street, "You cried in front of the Pope. What kind of man does that?" Traoré turned to her and said, "The kind that still feels." She didn't respond. She just nodded quietly. A young artist painted his transformation. Two halves of a face, one armored and angry, the other soft and focused. She titled it, Before the Call. When asked if she'd paint the after, she said, "I already did. Look around." In a national address, Traoré said, "We used to ask what's next. Now we ask, what matters?" There were no claps, no chants. Just a room full of people, breathing differently. Because they understood, he didn't give them a plan. He gave them space. An international award was offered. He declined. Not out of pride, but principle. "I don't want medals," he said. "I want mirrors, so we see who we're becoming." No headlines followed, but classrooms echoed with those words. A child drew a cathedral without walls. Her teacher asked why. She said, "So more people can hear." That image went viral. But Traoré never shared it. He didn't need to. He was building it one policy at a time. A minister criticized his quiet leadership, saw it lacked urgency. Traoré replied, "Urgency isn't volume, it's clarity." Later that week, water reached 2 neglected provinces, no fanfare, just function. A singer in Bamako released a ballad titled, "The One Who Hears Us." It never mentioned Traoré by name, but everyone knew. In the chorus, the refrain, "He heard the silence in our voices and gave it back to us." A mother whose son had died in combat left a note at the chapel door. It read, "You made his death feel less empty. Because you made his life feel seen." No one moved the note. Even the wind seemed to leave it be. An ambassador asked, "Why don't you speak more?" Traoré smiled. When everyone's shouting, silence becomes a message. He wasn't escaping questions. He was teaching others how to sit with them longer. In the refugee camps, hope shifted, not because food increased, but because anger faded. Traoré didn't bring miracles. He brought meaning. And sometimes that's the deeper hunger. A film student made a documentary. It featured no narration, only still images, a phone, a chapel, a bowed head. The title, One Call. The message, clear enough without words. On the anniversary of the call, Traoré gave no speech. He walked alone to the chapel, knelt, lit one candle, left, and the nation watching didn't ask for more. They had already received it. In homes across Burkina Faso, people told the story differently. Some said it was divine, others political, but all agreed that after that day, their president changed, and because he did, they believed they could too. A bishop visited the capital and asked to meet him. Traoré welcomed him not in his office, but in the chapel. No guards, no press, just 2 chairs, and when they left, neither said who spoke more, only that both left lighter. A street artist painted a wall, a phone cord stretching from Vatican City to the heart of West Africa. Above it, one line. No static, no lies. It stayed untouched for months. Even rival gangs respected it. A child asked in class, "What does our president believe in?" The teacher paused, then answered, "In us." No textbook confirmed it, but every family who had felt forgotten knew that answer was true. His political rivals grew quiet, not silenced, but softened, because opposition in the face of humility loses its bitterness. They still challenged him, but not his sincerity. The Pope passed away 2 years later. At the memorial, Traoré didn't sit in front. He stood at the back, head bowed. When asked why, he said, "He spoke to my heart, so I honor him with mine." A museum displayed his robe, the one he wore the day of the call. On the tag, a simple quote, "Power doesn't always speak. Sometimes it listens." Visitors came in silence, then left with questions. In a far-off mountain village, an elder gathered children and said, "You weren't alive when it happened." But that's when the country exhaled. That's when we remembered. We weren't just citizens. We were souls. Traoré never spoke publicly of the call again, but every decision afterward echoed its tone. He ruled not from memory of it, but from transformation through it, and those closest to him said he was never the same. Years later, a reporter asked him, "If you could say one thing to the Pope now, what would it be?" Traoré looked into the camera and said, "You didn't speak long, but you were heard by a nation." Not all stories need a twist. Some just need to be felt. If this story moved something inside you, share it. Comment what stayed with you. Because in a world of noise, we need reminders that sometimes quiet leadership saves more than speeches ever could.